ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube at the owner's expense. Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards.
Alright folks, I think most reasonable, rational Sophons can agree that walking combat robots are kinda dumb. Now I want to clarify for the sake of specificity that we are specifically talking about specifically combat walkers. When you get to like utility walkers or cargo walkers or stuff like that, the rules might change a little, so we're going to ignore that. And likewise, there are exceptions. A first good one is say you just don't have flying or hovering technology, or for whatever reason your flying and hovering technology does not work on this planet. You're going to need ground vehicles then. Now, I have absolutely no idea how a technological society could go from wheeled or tracked vehicles to walkers without first stumbling across flying vehicles. That doesn't seem very plausible, does it? But I do know that there are planets in, say, Star Wars where hover vehicles simply do not work. And since Star Wars appears to have completely abandoned the concept of an airfoil, they would have to use walkers or preferably wheeled or tracked vehicles. Walkers aren't the worst choice. They at least give you altitude, height, but there are better choices out there even still. A second exception is if you want armor on the ground for whatever reason, but it's not passable for, wheeled or tracked vehicles. A great example of this, in fact, one of the very few walkers out there that makes any sense at all, is the MT-AT from Star Wars. You probably never heard of it, because it's one of those legends of things that the mouse still hasn't bothered to dig out of the back of its dusty Star Wars bin. So, fine, whatever. Anyways, this thing meant to scale cliffs and climb up and down mountains and get to the rebels at whatever hiding spots they were at in the mountains. Makes a certain degree of sense, because you can't get a tracked vehicle up a cliff. And yes, I still hold to my belief that the AT-ST is a somewhat acceptable exception to the rule as well, simply because it fits in this category. It fits in places where maybe the larger land speeders of equivalent armor and equivalent weaponry could not fit, especially with those weird trees already taking out so many freaking speeder bikes. Goddamn moron stormtroopers. Regardless, the last major exception to the rule, probably the most obvious exception to the rule, is that combat walking robots are exceptionally good at intimidating the populace. Now, the populace might be the actual populace of the planet around you, or it might be the people you're fighting on that planet. Either way, a great example of this is the Empire of Man Titans from the Warhammer 40,000 universe. 'Cause ain't no one want to fuck around when the cathedral gets its goddamn self up off the ground and starts shooting shit. But in general, aside from those three cases, you are probably better served with a wheeled vehicle, a tracked vehicle, or a heavy flying vehicle if you have that kind of technology available to you. Now, all that said, there is technically a fourth exception to the rule. And basically it's this. Walking combat robots are fucking awesome. And that's pretty much the reason why the Battletech universe exists. I mean, at least I assume there's some kind of reason aside from because fucking awesome that combat robots are the primary means of engaging in, planetary combat in Battletech, given that they do have tracked and wheeled vehicles at their disposal if they wanted to go that route instead. But no, combat walking robots are just fucking awesome. Of course, ironically, there is, an exception to that exception, which brings us to the topic of today's episode. The Urbanmech. The Urbanmech is decidedly not fucking awesome, although apparently a disturbing number of you do seem to believe that it does fuck quite hard. So, yeah, what's going on there? Actually, let's go ahead and start with the name, because Urbanmech. That's actually its name. That's not its designation, that's its actual name. And this is significant because the Battletech universe is a very diverse universe and has such mech names as the Direwolf, the Warhammer, the Centurion, the Commando, and even such fun little names as the Flea. But instead, the Urbanmech is the Urbanmech. Okay? Guess what it does? If you guessed that it was designed for open field warfare, lining up rank on rank and taking on other mechs face to face, you would be totally wrong. It is in fact designed for urban combat. Shocker. I mean, seriously, who could have seen that coming? And due to that design purpose, this is naturally a light mech. Now this is significant because MechWarrior has all kinds of these categorizations and whatnot for how big a mech is. There's ultralight, which is kind of a weird class by itself because it may or may not technically exist, but it basically describes any mech that weighs less than 20 tons. There aren't many. Some would argue there aren't any. Also, the ton aspect, I have no idea what unit of measure they are using, but it is neither kilograms nor pounds. So whatever ton they are talking about, I don't even know where to start. Because they're talking about these massive walking robots, combat massive walking robots, weighing, 30 tons. Okay, fine. That's only about 7 minivans in your current timeline and with your current crash safety regulations. 7. That's all. 7 minivans make a walking combat robot that is huge and has very large guns and can walk through walls and stuff and can support its own weight. Yeah, I don't believe that unless you have unobtainium chassis and these little micro fusion reactors that are just violating all the rules of physics and all the rest of these other things that would require a technological base that is absolutely obscene. You just don't have enough mass available to build these things. Now, yes, I do understand that Battletech does in fact have fusion bottles and crazy crap like that. And yes, they do get away with myomer muscles for the mechs instead of servos and gears and actuators and whatnot, which supposedly saves them weight and gives them added durability and blah, 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 so on and so forth. So in the end, they write off a lot of this as just universe technology accommodating the mass requirements. Personally, I think they could have doubled the mass numbers and accomplished the same thing, but regardless, back to the mech mass bracketing breakdown. So aside from the ultralight mechs, which may or may not exist, the light mechs cover all mechs between 20 and 35 tons. Medium covers everything from about 40 to 55. Heavy does 60 to 75. Assault goes 80 to 100. And then apparently heavy wraps around again to become super heavy, and that's literally anything in excess of 100 tons. I think most of those are quadrupeds, which is a nice improvement off the bipedal combat form. I was kind of surprised that actually happened. Anyways, as previously mentioned, the Urbanmech weighs in at approximately 30 tons, which puts it near the top of the light category, which makes sense. It is, once again, designed for urban combat. You don't want some massive, blundering, clumsy war machine tumbling through your skyscrapers on its way to saving your skyscrapers. Whoops. So instead, you get a light mech, which actually has jump jets. Yes, they can fly now. And it allows itself to be maneuverable and get around the city quickly and engage the enemy from all kinds of vantage points, right? Right? Ah, crap. See, here's the problem. First problem. There's lots of problems. Light mechs in the Battletech universe are basically the scouts, as the archetype normally goes. Bigger, heavier things carry bigger, heavier armor and guns, whereas these little light guys just kind of run around and see what's going on and hope they don't get shot in the ass. Well, okay, fine. Accordingly, one of the most common light mechs out there, the Locust, can apparently clock in at 129.6 kilometers an hour. Holy crap, that's fast for a biped. So yeah, I mean, makes sense. He's out there tearing down the terrain, seeing what's going on, and taking what pot shots he can. It's awesome. And then one of the more bruiser-style light mechs, as if there were such a thing, but a light mech that is actually meant to, stand and deliver if the opportunity required it, as opposed to just run away, is the Commando. And he can pull down somehow 97 kilometers per hour. Still pretty freaking fast. And then we get to the Urbanmech. You know, urban warfare. You gotta like dip, dodge, duck, dive, and dodge, right? If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball, whatever. And you gotta get from point A to point B, and you gotta like hide behind buildings and scurry across squares and whatever the hell else you put in your cities. You gotta be able to move, right? Yeah. At 32 kilometers an hour. There are assault mechs that can walk faster than this little fucker. But the good news, and it is some of the only good news this poor little thing has, is once it gets there, you'll know it. So the funny thing about Battletech tech is that the general concepts of it aren't too removed from what you have right now. For example, autocannons still exist in the Battletech universe. They are naturally bigger, more powerful, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But the idea of a large caliber automatic firing cannon is, still around. They are referred to as autocannon/number, AC/number. And that number basically indicates how many rounds it fires, I think. There's some variance on this. But the general premise is that the AC-2 is a very long-range, not tremendously powerful weapon, whereas the AC-20 is a f-your-face-at-arm's-length weapon. Apparently the AC-20 is one of the most feared things in the universe, in the Battletech universe, that is. Well, guess what they slapped onto the side of the little Urbanmech? Yeah, an AC-10. So it's not the perfect f*** you, but it'll definitely get your attention. And given that Urbanmechs are fairly inexpensive, you can expect to find them in sufficiently large swarms that there is a company that makes the miniatures for the Battletech table game that now sells a 12-pack. Yes, you heard that right. A 12-pack of ambulatory trash cans. There are a lot of people who adore this little fucker, aren't there? The other bit of good news is that in addition to being short, which apparently makes targeting complicated in the Battletech universe for some reason, just, aim at the ground. I don't know, whatever. It also has a very rotatable torso. Much like you humie squishies, most Battletech torsos can't rotate past a certain degree. Most of them can't even rotate past 90, I don't think. Well, apparently the Urbanmech can do the whole, Strigiformes thing, where it can basically rotate its torso all the way around. I mean, I don't know if it actually can do a full 360, but I think it can do just shy of a 360. Might depend on the rule sets. I don't know. I don't actually play the game, as usual. Regardless, the upshot is, this little fucker can be fucking your face, awkward, with that AC-10 of his, while he's slowly walking away from you. So, I mean, that gives him a lot of extra time to unload the bare 1 ton of ammo he has at you, which are not a lot of reloads for an AC-10, but also it, of course, gives you the opportunity to give him the opportunity to shoot back, that is. So, trade-offs. The real hilarity of all this, this weirdness of this mishmash collection of weirdness that is the Urbanmech, is that it was initially built by a company that had never built mechs before. It is the only mech they ever built. Almost all of its components are unique to it, aside from the modular weapons arms that are bolted onto its side. And this design lasted somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 years. And that's just production time, too. They were still out in the field for hundreds of years after that, but they were built for about 500 years. It's like the Battletech universe example of an AK or something. I don't know. Regardless, with a 500-year production timeline, you can imagine there were a few variants of the little humble Herbalmech. It's an Herbalmech. The Urbanmech will now and forever hence be known on this channel as the Herbalmech. Deal with it. Regardless, variants of the Herbalmech. Well, I mean, basically, this trash can on legs had 2 mounting points, and people did the best they could with that. They came up with some crazy ideas. For example, some bunch of yahoos popped off that autocannon and strapped on a 30-pack of missiles. Oh, damn. If all 30 missiles hit the same target, it would have accomplished about twice as much damage as all 10-ish rounds from the AC-10. So that was somewhat surprising to whomever they first fought when they were expecting, whatever, Herbalmechs, they don't really matter. And then all of a sudden, missile spam. And then there was a firefight! Or something like that. But, of course, the craziness doesn't end there, because why would it? We're talking about an ambulatory trash can. Yes, on top of random missile launchers attached to the Urbanmech, someone decided it was a great idea to strap on a snub-nosed PPC. Now, I know, again, for those of y'all who are not familiar with Battletech, that means precisely f*** all to you. Basically, PPCs are, I guess, analogous to ion cannons. The acronym expands to a particle projector cannon, and it inflicts both thermal and physical damage, as well as electromagnetic jamming and shorting and basically EMPing. So it's basically a particle cannon with bonus ion effect. Anyways, this is normally the weapon of a, larger mech, because it's very power consumptive and it makes the mech very warm, which is actually the limiting factor in Battletech for, mechs. They don't really concern themselves with battery power or reactor power so much as they do about heat consumption, and PPCs produce a lot of heat both in the shooter and the shootee. And then some fucking nut job went and decided to bolt one on the side of a 30-ton light mech. Now, granted, it's a snub nose, which means it technically has shorter range than the normal PPC, which has a disturbingly long range, but still, think about coming around the corner in some city and looking down at the ground, or at least near to the ground, and going, oh, fuck me, sideways. Of course, I say the snub nose isn't that big of a deal, but then some other fucking rando created the quote-unquote sub-Herbalmech. I shit you not. And they put a proper full-size PPC on this little bitch. Because, we might as well just keep one-upping each other at this point. But finally, well, not technically finally, because it's not actually the last model of the Herbalmech, but finally, still, all the same, someone pulled the trump card. Oh yes. It gets so much worse. Because, you see, someone figured out that you could strap an Arrow 4 launching system on the side of the Herbalmech. Now, I know that saying Arrow 4 to those of y'all who are not familiar with Battletech technology means nothing, so allow me to explain. The SRM, MRM, and LRM systems are basically missile spam. They are packs of missiles that mostly fire all at once and try to hit as many things as humanly possible. The Arrow 4 system is more of a artillery-style missile. It's a ballistic missile. It's a intermediate-range theater ballistic missile, maybe. It's basically a complement to the Long Tom that we talked about sometime way in the past already. It's a missile version of the Long Tom, although it's actually technically shorter range than the Long Tom, but that's a whole different conversation. Anyways, the Arrow 4 can actually carry a whole variety of different payloads on it, unlike most of the LRM, SRM, MRM, blah, blah, blah missiles. You've got some air defense missiles, you've got a homing missile, you've got a cluster missile, you've got illumination missiles, you've got laser jamming missiles, you've got all kinds of craziness going on. And the craziness is actually the problem. Because, you see, there's a Davy Crockett payload for the Arrow 4 missile. Now, again, you might not know what that means, in which case I will refer you to the Chubby Sparky who made an episode about the actual Davy Crockett on your planet not that long ago. The long and the short of it is that the Davy Crockett is a half-kiloton nuclear fucking bomb. Well, technically a nuclear warhead on a missile, but still, nuclear bomb, half-kiloton. I mean, that's basically just a firecracker in terms of nuclear warhead sizes, but still! You're giving a mech that was specifically designed for urban warfare an artillery system. And not just any artillery system, but an artillery system that was deliberately, by some arguments, designed to launch nuclear warheads for an urban fight. I mean, if you wanted to go scorched earth, this is a great way of doing it. I mean, seriously, it's not like anyone would expect the ambulatory trash can to suddenly whip out a pocket nuke. It's like, hey, look at the little dumbass. Oh my God, my face is melting. Why is my face melting? Like, what the fuck, man? And I think fundamentally, this is why you humies love you some Herbalmechs. They're not that good. They are strictly not that good. They're kind of like the Fiero of the Battletech universe. Well, no, that's not quite right either, because the Fiero actually looked pretty good in its stock state, unlike, say, the Herbalmech. No, I guess the Urbanmech is more analogous to the feature car that you had once upon a time, where in its stock state, it was rather unassuming and underpowered and undercapable and under everything. But then some crazy absolute nut jobs got a hold of it, and then all of a sudden you had the Vendetta and the Manx and Baja equipped bugs, features, whatever. And they just took off. I mean, your chances of finding a totally unmolested VW bug at this point in your timeline is pretty much nil, because they were just so easily modifiable and upgradable and tweakable, which I think is where the Herbalmech falls in the Battletech universe as well. The base model works okay. I mean, it's not great, it's not awesome. Frankly, it sucks. But for its intended purpose, it does an okay job, especially given how cheap it is and how many of them you can buy. But if you want to do anything else with it at all, you're going to have to start tinkering with it to the point where you start strapping nukes to it. And, well, here we are with this massive cult following for the Herbalmech. There has got to be some amazing doctoral thesis for some non-terrestrial scientist about how you humie squishies absolutely adore you some underdogs. Wish I could write it myself.
And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube at the owner's expense. Have a nice day.